Hi, I'm Reece from ReFOCUS with Reece. I'm here today to talk about emotional safety in dementia care. I want to start by reiterating that emotional safety is not an abstract concept. It's created moment to moment through understanding, response, and consistency, and therefore it's a safeguarding issue and a CQC issue. We'll start with a familiar scenario. Someone wakes in the night. They do not know where they are. They do not know what time it is. They don't understand why somebody is approaching them. And the person coming towards them may be kind, calm, well-intentioned, and doing exactly what they believe is right. But that's not necessarily how it feels to the person living with dementia. What they may feel is fear, a loss of control, confusion, threat. And once that feeling takes hold, the behaviour we can see changes very quickly. Resistance, distress, shouting, trying to leave, pushing someone away, striking out. Now, we might later describe as behaviour that challenges or distressed behaviour, or even go as far to call it an incident. But before it was any of those things, it was a person feeling unsafe. That matters because if we're serious about safeguarding, this is where it starts. Not with the referral, not with the investigation, not once the threshold has already been met, but right here, in the moment, in how safe somebody feels, and in how well the people around them understand what is happening. If you're watching this, then you probably already know safeguarding. You probably work with it every day. You know the expectations, you'll know the threshold, you'll know the paperwork, the accountability, the seriousness of it. So I'm not here to teach safeguarding basics again. But what I do want to do is step slightly sideways and ask a different question. If we know more, report more, and regulate more than ever before, why do so many situations still escalate in ways that feel avoidable? Why do apparently small moments become major incidents? Why do services sometimes end up firefighting when the early signs were there? And why does good intent not always translate into emotionally safe care? That, to me, is where the phrase beyond compliance becomes useful. Because compliance matters, of course it does, but compliance alone does not create calm, does not create trust, it does not create shared interpretation in the middle of a distress response, and it does not automatically stop people from feeling frightened, overpowered, ignored, or misunderstood. So this talk is really about the layer underneath compliance, the culture underneath it, the human experience underneath it, and the safeguarding implications that sit there every single day. This matters now for two reasons. First, the CQC's March 2026 research on good practice in caring for people with dementia puts a strong emphasis on person-led care, communication, leadership, culture, staff training, and the balance between safety and freedom. It also explicitly highlights that staff communication, including body language and non-verbal cues, can either support or unintentionally undermine someone living with dementia. That's important because it moves the conversation beyond disease knowledge alone. It points us back towards the quality of the interaction itself. Second, our own local provider feedback tells a very familiar story. Communication is still the issue that keeps surfacing. Complexity in care is increasing. Information sharing is inconsistent at best. Some delays are affecting safeguarding. That means, on the one hand, we have a national picture in research saying good dementia care depends on person-led communication, leadership, staff confidence and culture. And on the other hand, we have a local safeguarding picture saying communication gaps, delays, complexities and escalations are still undermining safety. Those two things are not separate, they are the same conversation. My argument today is very simple. Safeguarding does not start at the point of concern. It starts much earlier in the emotional safety of everyday care. By emotional safety, I mean the extent to which a person feels secure, respected, understood, and not under threat in the care they're receiving. And I also mean the extent to which staff feel supported, contained, and able to think clearly rather than just react under pressure. Because when those things are missing, Risk builds, not always dramatically at first, sometimes quietly, in repeated misunderstandings, rushed interactions, in task-led care, and inconsistent responses across a team. If people feeling handled rather than understood, in staff feeling they have to act quickly rather than think together, then one day what could have remained a manageable moment becomes a safeguarding issue. This is why I think emotional safety belongs firmly inside safeguarding conversations, not outside them as some soft extra. It is central to prevention. We link all of this to the core safeguarding principles. The fit is actually very strong. Empowerment. For a person living with dementia, empowerment does not disappear just because cognition changes. It means doing everything possible to preserve voice, familiarity, agency, preference, and dignity within the realities of their condition. If somebody feels they have no control and nobody is really with them, their distress often tells us that before any form ever will. Prevention is a huge one. This is the big one. Prevention is not just about spotting abuse once it's obvious. It's about reducing the conditions in which harm is more likely to happen. Emotional safety is preventative safeguarding. It lowers the chance of escalation, conflict, trauma, restrictive responses, and avoidable incidents. Proportionality. Dementia care constantly asks us to balance risk with personhood. The CQC research makes this point clearly in relation to balancing safety, privacy, and freedom. A response can be well meant and still be too forceful, too task driven, or too controlling for what the situation actually needs. Partnership. The local survey is full of frustration about communication and continuity, but partnership is not only interagency, it also lives within teams, between shifts, with families, and with the person themselves. If interpretation is fragmented, safety is fragmented. And accountability. Accountability is not just about recording what happened afterwards. It's about being able to say, as a service or a team, this is how we think, this is how we respond, this is how we reduce escalation, and this is how we learn. In practice, what often goes wrong is not that people do not care. It is that the meaning of behaviour gets missed under pressure. A person refuses personal care. Another starts shouting when the lounge gets busy. Someone becomes suspicious and accusatory towards staff or other residents. Somebody paces, tries to leave, or lashes out during support. If we only ask, how do we stop this behaviour, we are already in the wrong part of the conversation. A more useful question is, what is this person experiencing right now? And what is making this feel unsafe? Because in dementia care, behaviour is often the visible part of a much deeper interaction between cognitive change, sensory experience, fear, memory, the environment, communication, and the response of other people. And if staff across a service are not helped to think in that way, they do what humans naturally do under pressure. They become more directive, more hurried, more inconsistent, or more avoidant. That's when distress deepens. That's when other residents can become affected. That's when a family concern might arise. That's when physical intervention or restrictive practice can become more likely. And that's when safeguarding risk starts to come into much sharper focus. So what does emotionally safe care actually look like in practice? First, staff feel safer, not complacent, not casual, but supported enough to slow down, notice more, and think clearly. They're less likely to take behaviour personally, less likely to panic, less likely to jump straight into control mode. Second, teams think together. They have a shared language for what they are seeing. They do not leave interpretation to chance or personality. They are able to say, this looks like fear, this looks like overload, this looks like shame or pain or confusion. This looks like a mismatch between the task and the person's current capacity. Third, responses become more intentional. Not perfect every time, because real life care is messy and can be unpredictable, but calmer, more consistent, more proportionate, more person-led. And the result of that is not just nicer care, it's safer care. Because emotionally safe environments reduce escalation, they reduce distress, they reduce the chances of interactions tipping into harm, confrontation, or trauma. They reduce the need for reactive decision making, and they improve the quality of information that then flows into safeguarding when concerns do need to be raised. This is why I do not think emotional safety can sit only at the front line. It's a leadership issue, it's a culture issue, and in my view, it is absolutely a safeguarding issue. The CQC research talks about leadership that moves away from task-based culture and gives staff flexibility to respond to personal need. That's hugely important in dementia care, because if the culture says, get the task done, keep to time, avoid disruption and do not deviate, then staff absorb that. And in pressured moments, they default to the task. If the culture says slow down, stay curious, understand the experience, keep people safe without stripping away control, think together, use reflection, then staff absorb that too. That is the difference between a service that repeatedly reacts to incidents and a service that steadily builds the conditions for prevention. So when we talk about culture, we're not talking about fluffy values on a wall. We're talking about what actually shapes behaviour in the hardest moments. And if that's not a safeguarding conversation, I would argue we're setting the bar far too low. So where does that leave us? For me, it leaves us with a very practical challenge. Not just are our safeguarding procedures compliant, not just do staff know how to report, not just can we evidence action after the event, but also do people living with dementia feel emotionally safer because of the way our service operates? Do staff have the support and reflective space to respond well when things become difficult? Do our teams share understanding, or do we leave too much to chance? Do we intervene early enough, proportionately enough, and collaboratively enough to prevent avoidable escalation? If the answer to those questions is no, or not consistently, the safeguarding is already in the room long before the paperwork arrives. And if the answer is yes, we are not only offering better dementia care, we are building safer services. I will finish where I started. Before a concern is raised, before a threshold is met, before an inquiry begins, there's usually a moment. A moment where someone feels frightened, or overwhelmed, or cornered, or misunderstood. And there is another moment alongside it, a moment where a member of staff either feels they have the support, understanding, and confidence to respond in a way that contains the situation, or does not. That is why I believe safeguarding starts there, in the emotional safety of everyday care, in the culture around the person, in the quality of communication, in leadership, in shared understanding, in the difference between reacting to behaviour and making sense of it. If we want safer services for people living with dementia, we need to create emotionally safer care, not as an optional extra, not as a branding exercise, but as part of what good safeguarding actually is. ReFOCUS with Reece helps work towards calmer moments through better understanding, at home and in care. Thank you.